So, afternoon everyone. Right, for those people that don't know me, my name's Andy Pearce. I've been at VMware and now VMware by Broadcom for 10 plus years. Always been in the network and security field. So you might have seen me before, might have heard me talk before. My if you like, area of specialisation is around NSX, Free Realised Network Insight, area operations for networks, HCX, vDefend, all of those products. Okay, so I've been asked to give a talk on multi-tenancy and how things around network and security are fixing some potential or providing a new capability for multi-tenancy within VCF going forward. Okay, but just like DSM, if you've got the VCF SKU and you deploy NSX, right, you're going to get capabilities actually in vSphere, right, which incorporates the VPCs. Yeah, so virtual private clouds, right, which is what you can deploy within a project to tenant, yeah, and how you can carve that up from a multi-tenancy perspective. So I want to make this session a lot more interactive than me just spiel at you, okay? So who has a requirement in their business or your customers or your, within your organisations to do multi-tenancy, right? And I don't just mean from a networking standpoint, but to provide an environment where you might have different business units, different lines of business, different projects, different tiers where you need to carve out a set of resources. And what I mean by set of resources, because I come back from almost a long time ago, an OpenStack background, okay? So what I call infrastructure primitives, okay? So to run any application, whether it is a virtual machine, whether it is a container, whether it is a serverless function, whether it is whatever, right, you need what I call the infrastructure primitives, right? Which are, you need some compute, you need some storage, and you need some networking, right? They're the infrastructure primitives, right? Whatever type of application you need to do, you need to provide that capability, and then you need to carve that up in some form of tenancy, and that's some sort of isolation, okay? So who has that requirement within their organisation? Is multi-tenancy a requirement in your organisations? Yes? No? Yeah? Okay. So, quick disclaimer, just because I might ramble on and I might talk about stuff that is coming in the future. Yeah? Right. So, VPC. Who actually works in or works alongside or works with the public cloud? So AWS, GCP, all of that. So who you understand the concepts of a VPC? Yes? Do the majority of you understand that concept? Yeah? No? Okay, I'm getting some yeses, I'm getting some no's. So what is the VPC, right? Let's quickly cover that. It's a way of providing think of it, right? You pay, right, AWS, right, some money. They give you a set of infrastructure that you want to run. It's how does AWS carve out a tenant, yeah, within that infrastructure that you're paying for? How do you create that isolation segment, okay? That's realistically what it is, okay? So if you look in the right-hand side, yeah, you've got like this cloud, and this is how you connect into the environment, and you have for want of a better word, you have a router with a firewall which allows security. What do you allow into this VPC environment? And then I have some networking, and I have some compute resources to provide this capability, okay? That's what a VPC is. It's just it's an environment where I'm going to run something that I don't want to talk to anything else within my environment. So, okay. So, multi-tenancy concepts, right? So, when I talk to networking teams, they very much look at if you like, the data plane. Okay, so NSX in its what is now called VCF networking was really good at multi-tenancy at the data plane. Okay, so what we had here is, right, you've got a green environment and a red environment. Now these can both be on a distributed port group, they can be on an overlay network, but the way we isolate that is using security groups and distributed firewall, because we can ensure that these blue VMs can't talk to these green VMs, so they're isolated. Okay, that's using the distributed firewall within NSX or vDefend. Okay, that's one way that you can do multi-tenancy. Okay, the next way is we can actually do VRFs. We can create a tier 1 router within NSX, right? Or we can even use EVPN. Okay, right. So this is a way that we create a network, yeah, right. So whether it's a router, whether it's a port group, whatever, where we can go, okay, this blue environment is completely isolated to this green environment. And that's another way of doing it, right? So NSX was really good, right, historically, at doing it at the data plane, okay? What we were really bad at was doing it on the management plane, okay? So what we had to do is, if you had different users coming in and how you wanted to carve this up, you would either need to use vRealize automation, VCD, some way of actually carving this infrastructure out, yeah, and having that level of security from a user perspective, right? So mapping, if you like, this environment, yeah, this blue environment to a cluster of a resource pool within vSphere, okay? Because that's what you want to do. You want to isolate the compute, your vSAN data store, right? Whether you're using DSM, right? So if you're going to put DSM on here with some databases, you want to separate those databases that were in the blue to being in the red. Sorry, between the blue and the green. Almost colorblind there, okay? So NSX was really bad at doing this management plane, but really good at the data plane. So we were reliant on something. But also what we were really bad at is our logging, right? So if we had an environment up here, okay, and we had, how do I get the logs or the alerts or anything that was happening in this blue segment, yeah? How do we actually push it out to, you know, a different logging environment, a different management environment? So if I'm only looking after the blue environment, how do I know whether the blue environment is happy or not? Okay, and this is where, you know, NSX wasn't that good at, and this is where the concepts of a project, right, and a VPC come in. Okay, so this is available today, but I'm going to tell you now that the multi-tenancy constructs in VCF, right, and new versions of VCF, 9.x or whatever, that are coming, this tenancy model is getting massively improved, okay? So you can do projects, you can do VPCs today, but there's things coming, which I'm not allowed to talk about, right, that are coming in this very, very shortly. That are, huh? No, it's actually before September, right? Okay, so what you've
maybe potentially.
Okay, potentially, right? Probably, right? Yeah.
You can say what September in fairness, could be 2013.
Yeah. Okay, so what projects do, okay, is provide that management plane multi-tenancy, as well as that ability to provide a developer-ready infrastructure for these guys, yeah? Whether you're running OpenShift, VKS, whatever you're running, okay? Because it's about providing, if you like, an environment where me as an enterprise admin, I create what is called a default space. Think of that as I am running, Coca-Cola, or yeah, but and I should actually know the drinks that we're going to run underneath Coca-Cola. But if Coca-Cola owns Sprite, I want to create a project for Sprite. I want to create a tenant for Tango, and I want one for Diet Coke. Yeah, so I want different tenants within that environment, and I don't want them to be talking to each other. Now, that could be, drinks, that can be universities, they could be faculties, they could be banks, they could be telcos. So if you think about any organisation can carve up how they want to provide this multi-tenancy. Okay, so the enterprise admin looks after the whole environment and then provides, if you like, these projects. Okay, now the project admin owns the project, okay, which is a subset of all the resources, okay, and we can provide that tenancy model, okay, and then within, and very similar to what Cormac and Scott were talking around quotas, okay, because it's the same sort of concepts, okay. What we want to provide is the guardrails, the quotas that each project is allowed to consume out of our resources. So if we've got a pool of resources that we're providing, okay, do we want them to consume all the IP addresses, all the resources for routing? Right? No, we want to say this environment, this is what they're paying for, this is what they're going to get the capability of, and we want to provide that to them. Okay. So the project admin creates or is the owner of that project, which is a set of resources. And they're a set of resources that you actually know from within NSX. Okay, so a tier 1 router, the segments, the security groups, the policy rule, and the rules. Okay. Okay. But then, what is a VPC? A VPC is, if you like, a subset of that project. Okay. And a VPC admin is more like a DevOps person, right? They want to just consume, I'm going to say those infrastructure primitives, right? That compute, that storage, that networking, okay? Right? So these VPC admins are DevOps people. They just say, I want resources, right? Do I care whether it's on subnet 10.10.10.10 or 20.20.20? I don't give a crap, right? They just say, give me a way of routing in and out, give me some addresses that I can resource to, right? And the big advantage is the VPC gets provided the resources either from the enterprise admin that he's given you a global address list, right, and giving you some right, or the project admin, right, because within a project you can have multiple tenant, yeah, you can have multiple VPCs. So it's a hierarchical multi-tenancy model. Okay, so you can carve out lots of different layers to provide the multi-tenancy that you actually need. Now, when we start looking at these environments around VPCs and projects, etc., okay, this is where, you know, in the old model, you would have had to have needed a cloud management platform or, you know, something to actually sort of carve out this. This all now comes within NSX and is provided directly into vCenter, okay? So within a resource pool, you can actually see, yeah, a VPC, okay, within vSphere 8, okay? You can actually see a project and you can actually carve that out even at a vCenter level, okay? So you don't need, right? So this is where, yeah, and you heard people talking about it. We had all these different business units, yeah, fighting, right? And this is one of the first things that has come out of the bashing together of different business units, okay, coming together and go, how do we make things work better for customers, okay? So what NSX provides, the capability from a VPC perspective, okay, is all fronted and provided as and you can actually, And within vCenter, you can actually create a VPC, which then communicates with NSX. So you can actually, it's a two-way integration. Okay? Any questions? Yep.
Don't you lose all the storage efficiency and optimization as a result of this, because you're now creating silos?
Don't think of the thing of multi-tenancy creating silos, okay? Think of it as, okay, I need to create an area of isolation, okay? So you're not creating a silo. What you're actually doing is creating the environment, yeah, where I am going to run those infrastructure primitives.
No, I absolutely
right?
get that. I'm familiar with tenancies, I'm familiar with landing zones, but here you've got a common resource, storage, and now you're having to create silos. That's what I'm seeing here. You see, you don't even talk about storage at this level, do you?
No, right, but okay, so this is, so a VPC is like a tenant construct, okay? Now within vSAN and within certain other storage vendors, yeah, we can integrate that within a resource pool, okay? So how do you carve up that storage tenancy as well, right? So you might want whether it's a database, whether it's some other, object storage or some other storage concept, right, that is available to this environment, right, but is not available here, because you want to create that area of isolation. That is what multi-tenancy is about. I want to give them an environment where they can consume their workloads and it's isolated from somewhere else, right? Because you might be a provider, right, where these VPCs or these projects are direct competitors to each other. Okay? And you need to provide that Chinese wall between those different environments. Okay? But what you want to be able to do is spin these environments up really, really quickly on the infrastructure. Right? And as Paul was saying, yeah, within this environment, do we care what you're going to be running in here? No. Right? It's providing that infrastructure primitives to run whatever you want to run it within it. Does that make sense?
I fully get it. It makes sense. But I think storage is a special case unless you've got some further architectural diagrams that shows how you manage storage. Because you'd want to, at some stage, you may want to concatenate these VPCs for obvious reasons, right?
Yeah. Right, so
sometimes you want to split those, so M&A type environments.
yeah, right. So from a data store perspective, okay, you can have a data store within this VPC, right? So it's just storage, right? Yeah. So right. So you've got within that environment, you've got those three what I call infrastructure primitives.
It's just that what you're now doing is moving away from consolidated storage to virtualized dedicated storage per resource pools. And the question was, does that take you away from storage efficiencies?
So for the way I look at it is so think of this as a whole ESXi cluster or a whole data center, right? That's a resource, right? What you are doing is you're carving that up, okay? In exactly the same way that you are carving up, think of it as you can carve up that data store in different segments to provide that multi-tenancy, okay? It's just think of it as if I go back many, many years, right, from storage perspective, right, you can have, you could have a whole disk array or you could have a LUN, right, and you present that LUN or that disk, right, to this project, right? That's all you're doing, right? But does that project or that VPC care whether it's a whole disk, a LUN, a subset, a file system, whatever you want to present to that environment, right? Does that, have I answered the question?
No, I think it offline.
Okay, right? Okay, right? But to me, right, it's, you know, you've got a common set of infrastructure and you're carving it up, right? And you're carving the network up, you're carving the CPU up, right, or the compute up, and you're carving the storage up, right? So you've got one common platform, and you're just carving it up how you want to, okay? Right. Right. So how do we actually do it, right? So today, how we do, right? So you've got a network, and this is how you do it, right? And you create an external IP block, which is created by the enterprise admin, okay? So in network or public cloud terminology, these are your floating IP addresses, okay? These are the IP addresses that are available externally. You then have your private IP address, which is created by your project admin. And within that VPC, you can have a public subnet, okay, which is available publicly using those externally available IP addresses. You can have a private subnet, which we will then use, right, to NAT, yeah, to hide those IP addresses, okay? Or if you need to do stuff which is isolated, so think about it, a heartbeat or something that you don't need connectivity, or you need connectivity, but it doesn't need to connect to anything externally. So there's ways that you can create all of these, and you can provide those different types of subnet within that virtual, that VPC. Now the key thing here is, right, all of the IP addressing, right, for this public subnet, that private subnet, or even that isolated subnet, are all provided either by the enterprise admin or the project admin in advance. So if I'm a VPC that I just want to create this environment, it's going to pull down those addresses from address pools that have already been predefined, right, and pre-populated. So all I'm saying is I just want a subnet. Go and give it to me, right? And then I can add a virtual machine, a container to all these different environments. Now today, right, this router for VPC is a tier 1 router, right? Going forward, there is going to be a very big enhancement around what we do here, right? Very, very shortly, okay? So I'm not allowed to steal the thunder of the big announcement that's going to be coming, but the way that we can actually, what we need to do about connecting to a tier 0 and going through, if you like, software-defined networking, that is still going to be there going forward, but there's going to be a different way that we can connect a VPC to your infrastructure going forward, okay? So it's a multi-tenancy model, okay? So, right, so where we create, a firewall rule, we can create those firewall rules and inbound and outbound, and we can do that NAT at that VPC edge, okay? Any questions? No? Right, and obviously we can do that east-west firewalling, that distributed firewalling with vDefend, okay? So, I think I've already touched on this already, right? So, the key thing is you actually use the DHCP server that is part of NSX to provide that automated provisioning of those private, public, and isolated segments. Okay. So, right. So the IP blocks that we create, we've already highlighted that, right? But what you have is you create those, and we provide those to each different VPC as as a VPC is provisioned or requested. Okay. So it's a very fast way to provide multi-tenancy, with a management plane and a data plane, where I can control. If I'm a VPC admin, all I am going to see is the resources that sit down here in the VPC. Okay. If I'm the enterprise admin, I see the whole global view, right? And if I'm a project admin, I'm going to see what everything within that project is. Okay? And that goes down into those 3 different tiers of infrastructure primitives, the storage, the networking, and the compute. And it gives that visibility for you. Okay? Right. So some concepts, right? So everything within. Sorry. Let's. So everything. Right. So everything within, a VPC, whether it's the green VPC or the blue VPC, all the virtual machines, containers that are running in that, if they're connected to any subnet, the default policy is it's allow everything to communicate. Okay? Because think of it as a resource pool that we want to have open communication with it. Okay? What we do have is a default from the word go, right? But you can obviously amend that. Is inbound. We're not going to allow anything in. You need the VPC admin creates what's allowed in. Okay. Right. But the default connectivity is everything within a VPC can talk to everything. Right. And this can be a distributed port group or or an overlay. Yeah. Doesn't really matter. Okay. Any questions on that from a security standpoint? Obviously, you can amend that. You can change that. You can change the security inbound, outbound, or whatever you want to do. Yeah? But the default group, the default policy is that everything connects to everything. Okay, so this is probably something that is really highlights how, if you like, the management plane is actually carved up now, because this is, if you like, the API call of how NSX was originally created. So here, this is how NSX was created. We basically had one API infrastructure set. Okay, so everything was under infrastructure. Okay, but now what we do, we've actually had if you want to deploy projects and VPCs, you have a different API call, which is how VOA, going forward, can actually call and carve up a VPC or a project, to give you the multi-tenancy. So you can use VOA, or I should say area automation, to create that tenancy, okay? Because it's actually inbuilt into the API. So this, at this level, this is where the project administrator's control or realm of influence is limited to. The project admin cannot get up to this level, to do any work or to get any visibility. So when you assign a user, you assign them a project, and that is assigned basically at this API level, and they get access below that. So a VPC admin, will get access to this this capability, think of it as a capability of providing, what can he do at that level. So a VPC admin cannot control the things at a project level, and a project admin cannot do things at an organisation level. So it's a very hierarchical multi-tenancy construct, okay? And it's a way that you can provide it. Any questions? No? All very quiet, right? I'm probably sending you to sleep, right? So when we talk around developer-ready infrastructure, right, or a DevOps model, right, the DevOps guy doesn't want to say, I need to know this IP address, this range, this, this level of infrastructure. He just says, I want a network, I want some storage, and I want some compute, right? Does he care where it comes from? No, right? He just wants to pull it down and consume it. And this is where, right, that developer basically just says, I want a subnet, I want some NAT address, I want some floating IPs, public IPs, whatever you want to call it. I want to consume some security policies, and I want some security groups. okay? And that's how he creates his environment of that connectivity, yeah, all ready to go, okay? So, right, so you have the, this is how you create it within VCF, okay? So you've got your VCF admin, which talks to the SDDC manager. Right, the SDDC manager then creates your workload domains. I hope this is all fairly standard to you guys. Yeah? You have the workload domain and you have the management domain. So your NSX manager sits in the management domain, okay? And then what I actually do is you create the edge cluster and the tier 0 gateways, right? And then the VPCs are created within the NSX manager, right? And they're provisioned within a workload domain, right? After the edge cluster and the tier 0 gateway has been provisioned, right? So the tier 0, right? The edge cluster and the tier 0 gateway are provisioned by the enterprise admin, right? Think of that as how do I provide that connectivity into my infrastructure globally, okay? Right? And when you actually create that VPC, yeah, you connect that into that connectivities into that tier 0 gateway into your infrastructure as it goes. Any questions? Have I lost everyone? Yeah? No? Okay. So, this is something else that is going to be enhanced going forward. Okay? So, I'm really going to highlight on a thing called a VPC span, okay? So a span can obviously run between different clusters, different environments, okay? It can go across different workload domains today, right? If you like, this option here doesn't really reside very well. Are we all happy with our VMware validated solutions? Can I show hands? Who knows of VMware validated solutions? Okay, who isn't aware of VMware validated solutions? Okay, right. Have a chat with me afterwards and I'll show you a great resource, because VMware validated solutions are how do I deploy VCF or our products in a way that scales in a best practice model, okay? And if you deploy VCF and you engage with PSA or whatever, they basically use VVS and some tools to deploy that automatically, okay? So the one on the right saying I have a NSX manager cluster which is shared across workload domains, multiple workload domains, doesn't really fit. It's possible, but just because you can doesn't necessarily mean you should, okay? So this way of configuring it is, yeah, you can do it, but it doesn't really fit with our VMware validated solution, right? Our best practice, okay? The ones on the left, or the ones on the left and in the middle are the way that we can actually recommend doing it. But VPC span is going to be a way of also saying, how do I provide, how far does that VPC span within my VCF environment? Okay, so yes, it can go across multiple different clusters or workload domains. It can go across multiple different clusters. It can go within a cluster and different availability zones. So you're going to be able to carve out and specify how far this VPC can go from a resource perspective. Okay? Does that make sense? And the VPC span going forward, yeah, is going to be greatly enhanced in VCF 9 about what we can do and how small you can make it, how big you can make it. It is going to be greatly enhanced. Okay. All right, I've got about 5 or so minutes. Any questions? All right. Yeah.
You've got your bottom bullet point about federation. The documentation says it doesn't support federation, but that says or suggests it does work with federation. It just doesn't go across regions.
Yeah. Right, so today it does actually work with federation, yeah. So need to have a quick look at what version you're running and what documentation, yeah. But as of the latest version, 4.2.1, from an NSX perspective, 521 VCF, yeah, it does. Okay, yeah. Any other questions? No? Okay. So, yeah. So, I'm probably going to speak probably too much here, right? So, here you have the tier 0 or tier 1 router, yeah? And that is where it's going to change, or there's going to be enhanced capability about something called a transit gateway, okay? Which is going to allow you even to connect into a VLAN on your physical network. So you can actually do your VPC into a VLAN and provide the floating IP addresses going forward, right? But you didn't hear that from me, okay? Right? So you're going to have a greater capability of what you can actually do within a software-defined network and how you can carve that up and create that multi-tenancy even within your physical fabric. Okay? And with that, I'm probably going to leave it there. I think I've got actually something that I want to... right, so... why is that? Here we go. And in something, if you really want to know about VPCs, and we talked about hands-on labs before, okay, the best way of understanding something is actually doing it, yeah, right? There is already a hands-on labs that allows you to create that multi-tenancy and how you create different users at the enterprise admin tier, at the project admin, and at the VPC admin, and how you can carve up that, and how you can see that, and how you see that within vCenter, right? Because NSX pushes a VPC construct into the vCenter, so you can map that capability, right? So you've got a way of creating those VPCs, those projects, all within hands-on labs. Any other questions? Do you see a lot of the customers that I generally speak to, right, multi-tenancy is a real pain for them, okay? And VPCs and that, to me, are a way of easing that pain. And there's been a lot of development around projects, VPCs, to provide a better model for multi-tenancy. So if you don't see the value, I really want to hear it, because I want to feed that back into the BU. But from my perspective, that multi-tenancy tiering is a massive benefit for infrastructure admins and developers, right? Because you've got a far easier way of consuming those infrastructure primitives. Okay? But you all seem very quiet and not giving me abuse and heckling me and asking the questions. So, yeah. Okay, with that, catch me afterwards, and I'm more than happy to go through whether it's anything around network and security, multi-tenancy,